And the second thing was that even though they took his wallet, they didn't take his life. Was that something to be thankful for? Because how many of us, we've been so upset. Some people even will put up a fight with someone with a weapon and risk losing their lives to save their money. Amen. So he was just thankful that they took his wallet, but they didn't take his life. The third thing he was thankful for was they took all he had, but it wasn't much. Amen.
All right.
And the fourth and final thing was he was thankful because he was the one who was robbed and not the one who was doing the robbing. What a way to look at things. What a way to look for and be thankful, because God, he loves gratitude. When we are thankful, when we look at things and we begin to, instead of grumbling, we find reasons to be grateful. He's truly a model of the 10 percenters. And I'm saying the 10 percenters because remember there were 10 lepers. There was only one that was, thank God for the easy man. So he was thankful in that, even for being robbed, even in being robbed. So I'm just going to ask this question. Do we consider that we sometimes fear the ingratitude of others, such as homeless people and the addicted, and that often stops us from doing the work that we should do because it gives us an excuse, and we study the character of some to justify our lack of commitment to them? We conclude they don't appreciate people trying to help them anyway. Imagine what Jesus sees in us, in our ingratitude. Imagine what Jesus felt as we go through this story and we read it. And he leprosy, and he cured leprosy. Just a quick reference on leprosy. Leprosy was one of the most dreaded diseases of the world, especially back in that time. It was caused by a bacillus and is characterized by formation of nodules that spread, causing loss of sensation and deformity. Now, there were degrees of leprosy, because we see Naaman, remember Naaman the soldier? Yes. That was cured of leprosy. He was actually a soldier, and he had high ranking, so evidently he didn't have the type of leprosy that was so severe that he had to be pushed off or banished. So now leprosy is treated with what's something called sulfone drugs. Leprosy is perhaps, listen to this, the least infectious of all known diseases. Leprosy. And they were so afraid of, but there was no treatment for it then. Perhaps we would have been the same way. People believed then that it was highly contagious and hereditary. And according to the book of Leviticus, the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 17, it was condemned leprosy as a plague. Yes, sir. On the basis of a hair and a scab, this is how they would monitor or see it. On the basis of a hair and a scab, a pimple, or a spot on the skin that had turned white, the priest would declare a person to be a leper and quarantine him for 7 days. Yes, sir. There was some fairness into it. Listen, if no change in the spot occurred by then, the quarantine would be extended another week. At that time, if the spot had started to fade, the leper would be pronounced cured and return to his normal life. So we can kind of see what was happening when Jesus tells them to go and report to the priest. However, if the spot remained or had spread, he was declared unclean and banished off into a colony of some sort, or a place where he was or she were away from other people. Yes. So we see that a lot of the view towards leprosy was Some of it was out of ignorance, or also out of caution, that if they didn't know, they weren't going to take a chance on receiving that. We think about the man in the temple with the withered hand that Jesus gave occasion for his critics to watch him to see if he was going to cleanse him on the Sabbath day, on the so-called day of rest. And yes, he did. And Jesus was angry with their attitudes.
Yes, sir.
Here was a man that was, anybody in here ever seen a withered hand?
Yes, sir.
It's not a pretty sight. It's not something that would be easy to live with. And here this man had a withered hand, and the people were mad at Jesus because he healed him on the Sabbath day. So, would that be considered ungrateful? A lack of gratitude for the fact that God had sent someone who was able to bring relief from pain and suffering for someone. I think that we could take pause now, because I believe that most of us think that we are grateful. If we took a survey, most of us would think that we are grateful people. Do I have any witnesses? Would we say that we were?
Yes.
But I believe that Jesus left this message here because we're not as grateful as we believe that we are. We are thankful and grateful for the things that may be closely connected to us, but many of the things that we should be grateful for, we may not be as grateful as we think that we are.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes we can complain about a church, about conditions in the church. And here we sit in an air-conditioned church with stained glass windows and whatever kind of lights these are, and great sound system. And there are people in the Philippines and Asia and Africa and Latin America that are off in a field someplace in the cold trying to worship. And might be doing a better job than we're doing. Amen. Am I telling you?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm not trying to say that a church that many churches can't stand improvement, but are we grateful for what we have thus far? Are we grateful for the fact that we are organized and able to assemble and have the freedom to assemble? Are we grateful for little things like that? Are we grateful that we were able to drive up here? Every one of us, probably few of us, carpooled. My wife and I each came in separate cars. Are we grateful for what seems like little things?
Yes, sir.
But they're big things to somebody else.
Yes.
The 10 lepers seems to be symbolic of universal ungratefulness.
Yes, sir.
Do you believe that is possible? Why would this account, and this is not a parable, this is actually a true story. A parable is a spiritual story that's meant to give some sort of insight to some sort of spiritual teaching. But this is actually a true account. This is not a parable. It said that there were 10 of them.
Yes, sir.
And they were all healed, cleansed, and only one came back.
Yes, sir.
So some people say that this may be symbolic of universal ingratitude. This picture of humanity with two hands occupied, holding on to something, looking for a place to put down something so it can pick something else up.
Yes, sir.
Greed, like the farmer that said, I run out of places to store my crops. So let me build a bigger barn.
Yes, sir.
So I have bigger place to put more crops. Not knowing that God has said, tonight I require your life.
Yes, sir.
Is anybody listening to me?
Yes.
I just want to make a couple of points and I'll have you out of here. We are actually running way ahead, I believe. there's a point, first point that I want to make is how suffering brings people together. Particularly these lepers. You ever notice, and I don't know as much here, but I know that in California that when you see many of these homeless colonies, it's multicultural. It's not segregated like sometimes what we see in the general society. When you're homeless and got no place to live and you're encamped under a bridge someplace, you don't usually say, well, I'm not going down there. You know, so suffering tends to do that, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
I noticed that suffering will bring people together sometimes like no other thing. Severe illnesses. I know that when we were going through my wife's cancer treatment and we were out there and we would go into the waiting room and everybody there either had cancer or they had a loved one that had cancer. Yes. And it would end up binding you, bringing you together to talk about different things where maybe you wouldn't talk to one another if it wasn't for that. Yes. But illness, suffering can bring people together like nothing else. Yes. You don't believe it, let something happen to you and see how quickly you put away your cultural and racial differences. If you get a flat tire at night on the road, you just about don't care who comes to help you. If they're getting there before AAA, you just want help. So suffering does that. It often unites diverse people. While in normal society, the Samaritan, remember the one, that 10th one, was that Samaritan would not likely have been welcome among the Jews. They were looked down upon.
Yes, sir.
But misery does love company. When you're in a miserable state, you're just looking for somebody else that has a little bit of misery.
Yes, sir. Because
you can get along better together, can't you? If you all happy-go-lucky and you all healthy and everything, and I'm sick and I'm sickly, you're not going to want to be around me. I need to get with somebody else that's sick too. Can you hand me the handkerchief? Can you go and give me a cup of water? So I'm saying that in jest, but it is truth. It is the truth. That is something that kind of feeds you and you feel more at home with somebody who's going through that too. You have that in common, that you're going through the same thing. So lepers were thrown together of not much significance. They didn't have much significance. Lepers were a great illustration of what it meant to be marginalized.